Hi, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on voiceamerica.com. I'm Patricia Raskin. This program's been on the air. We're in our 24th year, and it's a program that shows you how to turn your obstacles into opportunities and your problems into solutions and make your dreams come true. And today we're talking about a very important topic. We're talking about teens who are impacted by incarceration and where they have found a safe space to express their feelings on home and awareness. And there's a new anthology from the PATHfinder and the POPS Club. And we'll talk about that. PATHfinder is Paving a Trail of Hope, and POPS is Pain of the Prison System. And so these young people have a place in their words that they feel are like home. And the book is called Home and Away, Poetry, Stories, and Art. And it's the latest annual collection of deeply personal reflections and creative expressions for members of the PATHfinder and POPS Club nationwide. And to talk about this today are two wonderful guests. One is Leticia Longoria-Navarro, and she is the executive director of the PATHfinder Network. They're in Portland, Oregon. They're a nonprofit that provides justice system impacted individuals and families the tools and support they need to be safe and thrive in our communities. Also, we have Amy Friedman, who is an author. She's an Out of the Woods press editor. She's a criminal justice activist, and she founded the POPS Club in 2013 with her second husband, Dennis Danziger, a writer and high school teacher, as an inclusive space for youth who have been stigmatized and silenced by their experiences with the criminal justice system. She was previously married to a man who was in prison, and her stepdaughters were inspired to find a way to support youth that her girls didn't have. So POPS is now across the country as well. So we're talking about the POPS Club and also the PATHfinder Network with Leticia Longoria-Navarro and Amy Friedman. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It was a long introduction, but we really wanted to get all of this in. So let me start. I'm going to start with you, Amy. What does the concept of home represent? Why is it one of the central themes of this year's anthology? What are some of these commonalities that are experienced by teens, in their longing for their incarcerated loved ones?
Well, let me say that just to make clarify a little bit, the POPS clubs were founded 13 years ago, but the PATHfinder Network has taken over running all the POPS clubs. The name remains because they existed for a long time. And so the authors of this volume, the authors and artists who created this volume, Home and Away, are the youth who are members of clubs, both the PATHfinder Club and the POPS clubs around the country. And this volume, so it's actually our 10th volume. And what I'm the editor of the books, and what happens is work comes in. The clubs are these wonderful places inside, mostly inside schools. We now have some community clubs as well. But what happens is that there are places for kids who have been impacted by incarceration, also by detention and deportation, which I think it's important to mention, particularly in this moment in our nation. And one of the things that home is this place where they feel safe, where they feel they are allowed and encouraged and celebrated for speaking their truths, for being who they are, for not having to hide in the shadows, which, so many kids impacted by this experience feel they can't speak. I would say particularly in this moment. And so when the work comes in, when it's an arts-based club, and so they're encouraged to write and draw and have conversation and do all kinds of things. But the anthology, everyone's invited to submit, including graduates of the program. And when the work comes in and I start to read stories and see the artwork, I start to see themes coming through. Each year there's a different theme, and the themes speak to me.
All right, and
And
I'm just want to segue in. I'm going to go to Leticia,
sure,
because I'd
sure.
like you to comment on what Amy just said and how these two, the PATHfinder Network and POPs work together, and then we'll just keep rolling. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think Amy said it well. We're just one big family. I think it represents the beautiful history and legacy that Pops
Yeah.
was and is, and then obviously where we're evolving to. And with clubs across the country, it really provides an opportunity to be part of a bigger network, and be connected to something much bigger than just one club. And I think the anthologies represent kind of the collective power and impact of all the clubs that exist across the country, whether they're in a school or a community center, or now we're going into a juvenile justice facility to have a club as well. So it's really powerful.
I'll start with you, Leticia, on this one, and then Amy, please add. Why is it critical to support young people in opening up about this pain, this loss, this shame, and this anger as it relates to their parents' incarceration or somebody close to them incarceration?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in and then Amy, please
Yeah,
add it.
yeah.
Amy tells her personal story and her daughter's personal story so powerfully. There's this silence that exists when people are impacted by incarceration, detention, and deportation. And that silence is really harmful, not just to the person, but to the community, to the family, to the neighborhood that that person is a part of. And so what our clubs and the process of developing the anthology every year do is break up some of that silence, reduce some of that shame and the stigma that exists, and help people create meaning out of their experiences, build some hope and maybe some resilience, and those stories start to emerge in really powerful ways. Sometimes a line at a time or a word at a time, but it really creates meaning for the person, but far greater than that, right? For the club, and then anybody who opens up any
Hmm.
one of these anthologies as well.
Yeah. Amy.
I think there's a really telling story that I'll share. The very first club meeting, which was in 2013, in February 2013, the very first young woman who came into the club, we'd announced it at Venice High School in Los Angeles, and this young woman walked in, 10th grader, and she picked up her sandwich. We always have food. There has to be food whenever you're dealing with teenagers. And the second girl walked in the room and they looked across the room at each other, and it turned out that these two girls had been close friends since they were in kindergarten. Close friends who shared all kinds of secrets with each other, except for one, which was they both had fathers who were incarcerated from the time they were little girls.
Wow.
And it was the one thing they'd never shared with each other. And when they discovered, oh my God, my friend is going through the same experience I'm going through, that was really, for me, it was the impetus to launch this more broadly. Because one of the things that happens in the clubs is then these people find out they're not alone. They often, kids always feel alone anyway, like
Hmm.
teenagers, but this is one of those experiences that makes people feel more alone. And so they discover they're not alone. They discover all these shared experiences, all these ways they can support each other, um,
Yeah.
and the way they can educate all of us. So
Hmm.
part of the anthologies is to
Yeah.
educate the rest of.
Yeah, I have a question about that for both of you. And Amy, I'll start with you and then go to Leticia. On what you just said, there's so much education. What are the most common misunderstandings about people who are in prison and about their families? Because there is. And
Hmm.
immediately we have, for people who are not educated, it's these dark thoughts.
Yeah,
So, Amy,
yeah.
please talk about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's I you know I guess the commonality is oh my God, there's something wrong. There's something bad. There's something dark. Um, the, I think there's sometimes people expect, they'll say, well, they have an incarcerated parent, they're going to go to prison, or they expect
Yeah.
something negative from a child who is an innocent.
Yeah.
And that takes all kinds of forms, but the stigma hits hard, and many of these young people have felt stigmatized.
Yeah. Yeah. Leticia, your comments about that.
Yeah, one of the things that I think gets lost is that the impacts around the incarceration are mostly with a person who is incarcerated, and that's just not the case. As someone, a child who grew up with incarcerated parents, we were locked up too. Me and my siblings were locked up too, just in a different sense. We may not have been locked up physically, but the impacts of our father's incarceration definitely landed with us in a very direct way. And so when we're incarcerating someone, we're incarcerating and definitely impacting the whole family. And I believe the community as well. And so our job is through these anthologies and through the clubs is to lift up and illuminate some of those impacts, but not in a way that further stigmatizes the children and the families, but lifts up the resilience in spite of the impacts of their loved ones' incarceration.
Yeah, do you think that because of this, I mean, these incredible support and them able to heal and write and express and as you say, be uplifted, do you think that this is going to give them and has given them a lot of opportunities as they get older that they may not have had without this because their self-esteem would have been too low?
Yeah, absolutely. And Amy can speak to many years of this impact, but our first Pathfinder Club, which we started 4 years ago, just graduated its first group of seniors. So young people who had been with us for all 4 years. Kids who really were like, there's no way I'm going to graduate. There's no way that I'm not going to be in jail or dead before I'm supposed to finish high school. And one by one, we handed each of them a cord that they could wear at graduation, and they're all graduating. Which I think, the outcomes may have been different if they weren't connected to us and other folks who
Right.
built a community around those young people and invested in those young people.
And do they have plans as they
Yeah,
graduate?
that's what I was just going to mention. Now it's not just finishing high school, it's going to college, it's going to technical school, it's finding their dream job. So the potential and possibilities are endless, and that's the way they're looking at the world, which is, I mean, I can't think of creating something better of not just what's in front of them, but what's ahead of them times 10. So it's not only inspirational, but it's, I don't know, kind of magical in a sense to see
Yes.
the potential being cultivated in real time and then get to see the long-term impacts of it as well.
I think you've answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because you can expand. And Amy, why is self-expression through writing and artwork so important in the healing process?
Mhm. I'm not sure I know the why, but I know that it's true. Like I'm a memoirist and a memoir teacher too, outside of the work that I do here. And I I just see again and again, I think that when we write, we learn things about ourselves that we don't learn by speaking and thinking. That we make discoveries about our own strengths, our own creativity, our own wisdom, our own understanding. And we make these discoveries and it strengthens us, and then the experience of being published is profound. I just got this morning actually a text from one of the kids who graduated last year, and I mailed him a copy of Home and Away, and there he is, and he just sent this big E, all capitals,
Oh,
and there's just this joy and pride.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's very special. We're going to take a break. When we come back after the break, we're going to talk about what schools and communities can do to increase mental health awareness and combat depression, eating disorder, and suicide among teenagers that are at high risk. And we'll also be sharing stories, some wonderful stories from these anthologies as well. So today what we're talking about is teens impacted by incarceration, how they express their feelings on home and awareness in a new anthology from the PATHfinder and the POPS Club. And the book or the anthology is called Home and Away, Poetry, Stories, and Art. Okay. And again, the PATHfinder Network is a nonprofit network that provides justice system impacted individuals and families the tools and support they need to be safe and thrive in our communities. And then POPS is also a club that is part of this now, is part of this network. And so we're going to talk more about that when we come back, so that these two, the POP stands for Present Pain of the Prison System. So these clubs are now part of the network, so it's all one big family. So you're listening to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on voiceamerica.com, and we will be right back. Hi, everyone, and we are back. We are talking about teens impacted by incarceration, how they express their feelings on home and awayness in a new anthology from the PATHfinder and POPS Club. And it's called Home and Away, Poetry, Stories, and Art. The PATHfinder Club is paving a trail of hope, and POPS, P-O-P-S, is Pain of the Prison System Clubs. And these two have joined and worked together. My guests are Amy Friedman, who is an author and Out of the Woods press editor. She's a criminal justice activist, and she founded POPS, the club, in 2013. Leticia Longoria-Navarro is the executive director of the PATHfinder Network, a nonprofit that provides justice system impacted individuals and families the tools and support they need to be safe and thrive in our communities. All right. So my question is, what can schools and communities do to increase mental health awareness and combat suicide, eating disorders, depression, substance abuse for kids at high risk?
I'll start. I think there are many things they can do, but among them are providing places like clubs that give kids safe spaces where they are allowed to be who they are and talk about who they are and be supported for who they are. I remember learning many years ago, my husband was a longtime high school teacher, just retired. And I remember learning from him that the difference between a kid thriving in school and failing is one adult paying attention to them, one person giving them the attention that they need. And so, the thing about our clubs is they are spaces where kids get this kind of attention, feel this kind of safety, feel able to express who they are. And I think the other thing that happens in clubs is, when clubs exist, is other people in the school start to recognize that, oh, look, there are all these kids going into this room on this day. And, they start to think of them as people. And so, as opposed to an idea, right?
Okay, good. Thank you. Leticia, your comments on this.
Yeah, I think similar to what Amy was sharing, I think raising awareness and educating educators and anyone who's really working with young people about incarceration and the impacts is really important, because we're seeing folks dealing with the behaviors and the outcomes every day, but not necessarily understanding the why or the root causes. So I just keep saying this over and over. We got to get further upstream, and what I mean by that is before we start seeing attendance issues and behavioral issues, we've got to start working to make sure that young people have the ability to develop positively, have positive development experiences, and get them support and resources way before they start engaging in behaviors that we might feel are problematic. And so having that understanding is one of the first steps, and I think it's why the anthologies are so critical. Is to share some of those stories about the why it's hard for them to finish their homework, or why it's hard for them to stay awake in class, or why they're not consistently attending the after school activities, right? Is understanding some of the why in a way that would take tons of trust building and relationship building in a traditional setting. And so that awareness is important to reduce the shame and stigma, but also to get support and healthy adult supportive relationships in the lives of young people earlier on.
Yeah, and I think we talked about schools and communities, but specifically, what about teachers and community leaders? What they can do. And not just that, but to combat the hate speech that stigmatizes teens who have incarcerated loved ones. To get very specific, what would you say about that? Go ahead, Leticia.
Yeah, Amy talked about this earlier, but there's these statistics that say that young people who have incarcerated parents, and I was one of those young people, are far times more likely than kids who do not have incarcerated parents to go to prison themselves. And that statistic is just not true. It's just not the experience. And I think one of the things that we do is really try to dispel that myth that there are all kinds of other kind of social determinants and root causes that lead people to risk in a whole bunch of areas of their lives. But it's just not the case. And for young people who have incarcerated parents, it's not a great outlook, right? To think, gosh, the only thing that's expected of me is that I'm going to go to prison too. And that's the reason, one of the reasons that our clubs are so important and powerful is, they become published artists and writers. And that's different than what's already expected of them potentially. And we talk about what happens beyond, and we bring guest speakers and writers and photographers and all different kinds of really successful people and who had incarcerated loved ones or parents to see what's on the other side, right? And that prison isn't the only way that
That
we'll
is so great that you're doing that. Amy, your comments about this.
Well, I'm going to tell another little story, which is that when we first started POPS for 12 years ago, 13 years ago, there was a teacher at Venice High School who was, I guess, pretty demeaning of a lot of the kids who were struggling. And a number of them were in the club, and we finally invited her to come visit the club and changed her dramatically. When she started to learn what sorts of challenges these kids were dealing with, suddenly her empathy grew. Suddenly her perspective on who they were and why maybe they were acting out or falling asleep, as Leticia mentioned, just changed dramatically. And then when she saw what they were writing and the art they were making, complete transformation. So I think that it's really important for teachers, for all of us, to recognize our prejudices, right? To understand that if we don't know the story somebody is experiencing, we can't judge them. We have to learn who they are and find out what they're about and keep our hearts open.
Well, I'm also thinking this is not just within this community. What you're doing is you are sharing these concepts that move out into the world, right? Because when you bring in these speakers who've had families who've been incarcerated who are successful, they're getting the word out. So this isn't just the little POPs and little Pathfinder Club. This is changing the way people are thinking. And, it's like the 100th monkey effect, where, the monkey on one island did potatoes and then whatever the story was, but it transferred. So I think this awareness is just so very important because it's really all part of discrimination, right? It's part of, really it is discrimination, whether it's sex or age or color or race or whatever is happening. So I think this is just really important what you're doing because it's affecting it's affecting the world.
We agree.
I'm sure, well, and let me say this, and this is so full self-disclosure. Maybe I shouldn't say this on the air, but I'm somebody that has not been exposed to this. And so it was hard for me. I was sharing off in the break that I visited 2 prisons in my lifetime in my career because I was part of a leadership group and we were visiting institutions in the community and in the state. And it was new for me and it was hard for me. It was something that was so foreign that I didn't and it frightened me and until I really understood it. And, then I worked with leaders in the prison reform system who are in the system now. And I did workshops for them. And it just, the exposure helped me. But I have to say that when I was first exposed, I just didn't understand it and it was scary. And I'm sure I'm not alone. comments about that?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that culturally we perceive people who are incarcerated is be afraid.
Yeah.
And most people who are arrested or sent to jail or prison, make mistakes. Like they're not people to fear. Um, and I think that it's really easy to make people feel afraid. And when people feel afraid, they get all the sort of walls go up, there's no room to listen or see humanity.
Yes. Leticia, any comments about that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that, there's about 113 million people that have ever had a loved one that has been impacted by incarceration, in some way. And that's a lot of people. So I just think leveraging our own personal experience is important. The people who are incarcerated are our moms. They're uncles, our aunts, our cousins, our best friends. They're the people that we love. And so when you don't have that experience, there's a lot of fear that's available to access. But that's something I always try to lift up is it's people's loved ones that are incarcerated. They're a part of families. They're a part of communities. And while people make mistakes and people should be accountable, no one ever wants to be judged solely by the worst thing that they ever did. And I think, our responsibility as a community is to provide pathways for people to experience redemption and accountability, but also acceptance and community and love, because that's what's going to keep them safe and keep us all safer and them more successful is support and forgiveness and opportunities for redemption.
Yeah, I think that's and second chances, right? Second chances. I I will share this too. There's a woman that I interview on my program every month, and I love talking about her. Her name is Paula Marshall, and she is the CEO of a company called Bama Industries, and they are out of Tulsa. They have plants all over the world. They make all the fast food desserts for McDonald's and for Pizza Hut and Walmart. They started out with apple pies in the 1930s as a family business. I'm telling you this for a reason. So Paula is extremely philanthropic and humanitarian. And Oklahoma has the highest number of people incarcerated in the state.
Yeah.
And she has brought on some women who work for her who were incarcerated. And she said on the air once, she said, I've got to tell you something. They are the hardest workers. She said they will get to work if they have to take a bike, if they have to walk, if they have to take a bus, whatever it takes, because they know this is a chance for them. And she's very happy with them, and she's promoted some of them too.
Yeah, that's really great to hear.
So I just wanted to share that. Yeah, it's a food manufacturing business, and they're very, very people oriented, and they really take care of their employees, who they call team members. So, all right, any other comments? Because we are going to take a break in a couple of minutes, and then when we come back in our third segment, I'd love to hear some stories, stories of inspiration. But let me ask you this before we go to break. I'll start with you, Leticia. How and why did you get into this field?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think growing up in a family that was impacted by the criminal justice system, but also, addiction, mental health, a bunch of other systems, there were a lot of times where um, yeah, I would say I felt powerless or even sometimes invisible. And it was because there weren't programs that existed in my high school or in my, environment at the time. And so I've spent most of my career kind of creating opportunities for people to be supported and have the resources that they need to
Mm.
yeah, be healthy and thrive and, be the people that they're dreaming to be. So it's really based on my own experiences and wanting to create opportunities for other people in my community.
And Amy, I know you had a
Yeah,
husband in the
I
system.
I mean, I guess, to go back a little further than that, the way I ended up married to somebody who was in prison was I was a newspaper columnist, and I went into prison to write about prison, to find out about them and write about them. And I fell in love with a person.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I imagine it's hard for me to go back all those years. It's over 30 years ago, and remember who I was. But I think I was probably a little scared, or, I'm sure I had all kinds of fantasies about what prison was until I went in and started talking to individual people day
Mm,
after day after day, and discovered people,
mm,
and their families and their children and their
mm,
spouses and their parents. And
mm.
yeah, so that was the beginning for me. That was the beginning of my consciousness raising.
So you've both been impacted in different ways and, are here to help so many people. It's really wonderful. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to, in our third and last segment for today, we're going to talk about stories, individual stories from both Amy and Leticia from the books, from the anthologies, from the youth, and that will inspire you. So you're listening to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show. And today what we're talking about is teens who are impacted by incarceration and how they express their feelings on home and awareness in the new anthology from these two clubs, the POPS Club and Pathfinders Club. And now we're going to hear some of those stories. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone. We are back. You are listening to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show, and we're talking about teens who are impacted by incarceration and how they are able to express their feelings about home and about being away in a new anthology from the PATHfinder Club and the POPS Club. Home and Away is an anthology of poetry, stories, and art. We're going to hear a lot about that now. And we are talking to Amy Friedman and Leticia Longoria-Navarro. Leticia Longoria-Navarro is the executive director of the PATHfinder Network, which is a nonprofit that provides the justice system impacted individuals and families the tools and support they need to be safe and thrive in our communities. And Amy Friedman is an author, an Out of the Woods Press editor, criminal justice activist, and she founded the POPS Club in 2013 with her second husband, and who was a writer. And she previously was married to a man who was in prison. Her stepdaughters were inspired and inspired her to find a way to support youth in a way that her girls never had been supported. So this is wonderful, groundbreaking work that's helping millions and millions of people. So welcome back, Amy and Leticia. Let's hear some incredible stories. Who would like to start?
Okay, I'll go ahead and I'm going to tell a story because it's about the anthologies and their impact on kids. There was a young man in the Pops Club many, many years ago now, who had been for a long time homeless. His father was incarcerated. His mother lost their house. He and his mother and siblings were living on the streets for a long time. And as a result, he fell far behind in school. And but sort of deep in his senior year, he was a member of the club, and kids, they're arts-based clubs, so kids were writing. And one day his writing skills were not very developed, but one day he wrote this powerful piece, very short, got up in front of the room, read it to the class. Everybody was cheering, and it was like they were lifting him on their shoulders almost. Years passed. He graduated, and years passed. He got in touch with us one day to ask my husband and me a favor. He said, "I want to meet you for coffee. I have a favor to ask." And we kind of thought, we didn't really know what to think, but we thought maybe he needed help with something. We met for coffee, and he told us that he had gone through another period of homelessness, and he had been living in his car, and he had all his belongings in his car, and his car was broken into, and everything was taken. And what went through my mind was, oh, he's going to ask us. Now he'd gotten an apartment, and he was living with a girlfriend, and he had a good job, and things were going well. I thought maybe he was going to ask to borrow some money to buy a bed or something. And he said, when I was robbed, one of the things I lost was my anthology that had my poem in it. And that poem was so life-changing. I just wondered if it would be possible for me to get another copy of the book. And it was just, you asked at one point, Patricia, what it means to them, and how it's healing. Clearly, he said that was the most healing moment of his life, when he wrote that piece and stood up in front of everybody, and then when he saw it in print. And so, yes, we gave him another copy of the book.
Yeah. Wow. Leticia.
Yeah, I love that story that Amy just shared. I was also going to just read a piece or two from the anthology that I think demonstrates what folks would find in one if they picked one up. So this piece is called First Poem by Jenilyn Guerrero. I usually don't think about myself in another life. I mean, there are times, of course, but most of the time I imagine my mom in a different lifetime. Like in another lifetime, I hope she got to finish college faster and get her dream job. In another lifetime, I hope that she found a partner who loved her like she always wanted. In another lifetime, I hope her brother made it past 18 and they both grew old together. In another lifetime, even if I'm not alive, I hope she got everything she deserved in this one. But because I know that she wouldn't trade her kids for any of those things, I hope in the next lifetime she gets all of those things and I still get to be her daughter, or at least someone she sees as we pass each other on the sidewalk.
That's beautiful. Isn't that beautiful? How old was she writing that?
She was about 17. She
Yeah.
graduated last year,
Yeah.
and she's in college.
Isn't that wonderful? And she's obviously very close to her mother.
Yes.
Who was incarcerated at one time.
Hmm. Wow, huh?
Yeah.
Hmm. Do we have another one?
Yes. This is actually a piece that called I Come From, that is a line from a different student in the club. So this is a bunch of different authors represented. So it's called I Come From. I come from households where I'm afraid the people around me might not come home. I come from silent treatment and quiet fights. I come from a family of four. I come from a place where fear will get you killed. I come from a hardworking family with dysfunction and love. I come from a home overlooking the beautiful sunrise that makes me wish every morning that I was in London. I come from a house with unstable conditions and a cherry tree house. I come from the courage and strength of my immigrant abuela. I come from a lot of thinking, 11 siblings with different moms. I come from not knowing when to bite my tongue. I come from fried chicken. I come from fear that made me fierce. I come from a struggling family. I come from people who care. I come from sitting alone at my home. I come from years of wanting to get out. I come from beautiful, strong women who teach me life lessons while smoking a black and mild. I come from falling asleep to the sound of fighting parents. I come from having a hard time picking the best product for my curly hair. I come from hard work, love, anger, two worlds, ancestors who sacrificed for me to be here, broken dreams, poverty, struggle, success, Saturday drives with my dad. I come from a crazy state. I come from two suitcases, one backpack, and 25 cents. I come from Portland. I come from not feeling equal. I come from still being judged and despised. We all come from somewhere.
Wow. Well, tell me about her. Tell me about the girl, how old she
Yeah,
is and what's happened with her.
yeah, this is actually a piece that came from a club, and the activity is to use the prompt I come from, and they each write it, and then we put all of the pieces together. So this is actually a piece that represents all of the members in the
Wow.
club. Yeah.
Wow.
Probably maybe 20 to 25 young people that
Mm,
submit for it. Yeah,
mm,
really powerful.
powerful. And there's strength in that.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, there's a saying in psychology, if you can name it, you can tame it. And
Right.
That's
that's what
right.
this does. It helps you. Amy, do you have one?
A piece? Um,
Yes, a story.
well, a story. I'm going to tell a story about one of my beloveds. Young woman who came to club when she was 13 years old, just turning 14, ninth grade, right out of middle school, where she'd been arrested for getting in a fight on the playground. She graduated. She is now 26 years old. I can hardly believe it. But when she came into the club, she was this feisty, angry, upset ball of fire. And she started writing and writing and writing and writing. And she made this discovery. I remember one of her poems, she wrote about her dad. It was called His Blood Runs Through Me. And it was like in that poem, she discovered how much she loved her father. She had been really angry at him because he'd been in and out of jail and wasn't a big part of her life. And they got really close as a result of that poem. She is now a paralegal about to go to law school. She's first
Mm,
person in her family to graduate from university. She's a powerhouse still, but for
mm,
all good. She's just the
mm.
most uh yeah, she always talks about how, if not for the club, she doesn't think she would have graduated high school.
Yeah.
Um, so it just transformed her life. And
It's
and
interesting because I would say probably 70% of the people I've interviewed, and I've interviewed over 5,000 people in my career, probably
wow,
70% are people like this who have been through what they're writing about. They become an expert, they become outstanding, but they've been through it.
yeah,
And I think those are the best teachers, right? I
oh
mean,
yeah,
my mantra is by Richard Bach in the book Illusions, where the seagull says, we teach others what we need to learn most for ourselves.
yeah, Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right, closing thoughts from both of you. What would you like to leave our listeners with? Leticia, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so we're just really excited about the release of Home and Away, and so we would love for everyone to check it out. It's available really on any platform, but you can access this book and all of our many of our other anthologies on outofthewoodspress.org.
Thank you. And that is Out of the Woods Press, your press? I mean, your press through the PATHfinder Club?
Yes.
So it's your own, it's the PATHfinder Club's press. That's great. Great. And how many books do you have in the Out of the Woods Press so far?
Go ahead, Amy.
Well, there are four. Well, we just finished our fourth.
Yeah, three published.
There are three published so far. The earlier books were before the press was founded, but they're also available. And
Wonderful.
actually, I think we should give everybody the pathfinderclub.org is a website where people can learn more about the organization and talk to Leticia about ways to bring a club like this to your community, because I think they should be everywhere.
Absolutely. All right,
Yeah,
we've got 2 minutes. So Amy, 2 minutes. So give us a quick, your summary, what you would like to leave our listeners with. Definitely pathfindernetwork.org. People, if you want to find a club, please contact pathfinderclub.org. Right?
I guess I would just say that I hope people will think about their own prejudices and fears. And one of the things I think that reading these books will make you fall in love with these young people that maybe prior to this you couldn't have imagined loving. They don't all write about incarceration, but they all write about what it's like to be them. And I think people will love the books. And also, if you know any teenagers eat these books like they're candy.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, pathfinderclub.org. Right? Right.
That's
Correct.
right.
Thank you both, Amy Friedman and Leticia Longoria-Navarro, for being on this program to inspire all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.
All right,
Thank you, Patricia.
stay on for a minute. All right, folks, this wraps up this edition of the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show. If you'd like a copy of my newsletter that I send out the first of the day every month, so you can see all the great guests, contact me, patricia@patriciaraskin.com. Also, if you would like to get your positive message out, like a lot of these wonderful people are, please contact me. I help people create their own podcasts since I've interviewed over 5,000 people in my career. I would love to help you. So contact me, patricia@patriciaraskin.com. Remember, stay healthy, stay happy, get the support you need, and know you can make your dreams come true. Until next time, I'm Patricia Raskin. Bye for now.